Welcome to Fantasia, home the melodious. My name's Azallea, and today I'm gonna be bringing you guys a brand new deck profile, one that I haven't done on this channel before. So today we're actually gonna be jumping into my Trickstar deck profile, and this build of Trickstars is not going to be based around burn or handlock, because those seem to be the more common versions that people like to play, and they're also the versions that give the archetype sort of a bad rep. So I kind of want to change that today and bring you guys a more refreshing take on the deck. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. So starting off, we are playing 3 copies of Trickstar Candina. Now, Trickstar Candina is probably the main card of the archetype because when this card is normal summoned, you can add 1 Trickstar card from your deck to your hand. And each time your opponent activates a spell or trap card, you inflict 200 damage to your opponent immediately after it resolves. So Trickstar Candina is fantastic because it can search everything in the archetype, and that's always great. Having a searcher for the deck, as you guys know, being a Melodious player, I just love searches because Melodious inherently don't have any type of searching. So having a card like this, especially within the first set of the archetype's release, is just very, very good for the future prospect of this archetype as the series progresses. So anyway, moving on, we're also playing 3 copies of Trickstar Lycoris. Now, Lycoris is pretty good because it has a quick effect where you can reveal this card in your hand, then target 1 Trickstar monster you control except Trickstar Lycoris, special summon this card, and if you do, return that monster to the hand. And each time a card is activated to your opponent's each time a card is added to your opponent's hand, inflict 200 damage to them for each. So Lycoris is usually used in all of those burn variants where you just make your opponent like discard their entire hand and keep drawing, and you keep burning them for a thousand damage at a time, and it's going to be very effective. But in this build, she's actually going to be very good because she's a level 3 monster, which allows us to go into a lot of our extra deck plays, and also she's really great for just returning cards from our field to the hand. So like Trickstar Candina is a really prime example. You can normal summon your Candina, add your Lycoris, bounce your Lycoris, bounce your Candina back to your hand to summon the Lycoris, and then you can go from there. So that's why Trickstar Lycoris is definitely going to be run at 3, pretty staple in a Trickstar build. So the next card that we're going to go into is 1 copy of Trickstar Lilybell. Now Lilybell is only really here as a tech, but she's a really great recovery card. So she has the effect where if this card is added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can special summon it from your hand. And you can only use this effect of Trickstar Lilybell once per turn. This card can attack directly, and when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target 1 Trickstar monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So what Trickstar Lilybell does is if you add it to your hand with something like Candina, you can special summon it straight from your hand. She allows you to easily swarm your field, and so you can go for your Trickstar Link monsters, which are really nice. They're really versatile, especially with their link markers, which can enable you to go into a lot of your extra deck plays. Lilybell is also great for just poking your opponent for a good amount of damage, 800 damage, so it's about like, you know, Gaga Cowboy type of damage, but it does add up over time, especially because you're doing a lot of burn damage with like Candina, with Lycoris, and with Light Stage. So Lilybell is actually really good, and when you add a monster back, like let's say you add something like a Trickstar Lycoris, during that battle phase you can still bounce that Lilybell back to your hand with Lycoris, special summon the Lycoris, and then you can go for some more damage. So that's always really nice. You can always just keep recycling her, and that's why you only really need her at 1. Okay, so moving on into the next few monsters, we're going to go into some of the engines that we play in this deck. So we are playing 3 copies of Lonefire Blossom because we are playing a Predaplant engine in this deck, and Lonefire just helps us get more consistent access into the Predaplant engine. So of course we are playing 3 copies of Predaplant Orphis Scorpio. Now Orphis Scorpio, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard to special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck. And the monster that you're typically going to be summoning with this, of course, is going to be Predaplant Darlingtonia Cobra. Now, Cobra is amazing because if this card is special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, you can actually add 1 Polymerization or a Fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. And this enables a lot of shenanigans. This is probably the main engine of this deck, and it's why it makes it work, and you're going to see why. A lot of the plays revolve around these Predaplants, especially for setting up our nice fields. The searches that they can search out, the targets they can search out, we're going to get into in just a bit when we get into the spell cards. So that is it for the Predaplant engine. Next off, we're going to go into some of the text that we play. So we're playing 3 copies of Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow. Now Gofu is a phenomenal card here, especially because it's a level 5 tuner that can special itself from the hand. Now Gofu is a very popular card in a lot of rogue decks where you can just special summon it from your hand, summon 2 tokens to your side of the field, and use those tokens to go into your link monsters such as Proxy Dragon and then eventually into Decode Talker. Now Gofu here in this case has actually a lot more utility because you can actually use it as a tuner to go for a lot of your synchro plays. And we also have a lot of link monsters that Gofu gives us access to, or easier access to, so that's also why he's there. Okay, so next off we're actually playing 1 copy of Archlord Christia. Now, you're probably wondering why are you playing Archlord Christia in this deck? Well, this approach to Trickstars is Trickstars are an archetype that kind of just annoys your opponent, that forces your opponent to try to play around them, and for my version here, Archlord Christia is the card for the opponent to play around. And we have several different ways of actually just summoning it. You can summon her with her own effect, or if you have 4 fairy-type monsters in your graveyard, you can just special summon this straight from your hand, and then you can add one of those fairy-type monsters back from your graveyard to your hand, so that's always really nice. But we also have another way of summoning this, and I'll get into that when we get into the spell cards. Okay, and because we're playing the Predaplant engine, our main fusion target is going to be the Brilliant Fusion. So for Brilliant Fusion, I have 1 copy of Perform H Trick Clown, which is a good light target to send. We have 1 copy of Heroic Challenger Thousand Blades. Now this is really just for the Predaplants to overlay into MX Saber Invoker, so that you can summon this Earth Warrior monster from your deck. And then because this is Earth and Mrs. Radiant is, Invoker is also Earth, you can use both of those as materials for Mrs. Radiant, and then that gives you a nice link monster with bottom left and bottom right arrows for you to summon all of your other extra deck monsters too. So this is really nice. And then when you activate Brilliant Fusion and you send your Trick Clown, when Trick Clown comes back, every time you take damage, you can special summon the Thousand Blades from your graveyard. So basically you can make a free rank 4 monster with this play. And it's just really, really nice. Okay, for our Gem Knight target for Brilliant Fusion, we're running 1 copy of Gem Knight Lazuli, but you can feel free to run whatever you would like. And then we're going to end off the monsters with a few hand traps. So starting off, we're playing 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Pretty much a staple in this format, I believe. It's so good hitting those monsters that effects activate on the field. It's really good at hitting field spell cards and continuous spell and trap cards. It's just such a versatile card. I definitely recommend you play this. And of course, to cap off the hand traps, we also have to play 1 copy of Max C, just in case your opponent's starting to pop off with, especially like cards like Spirals. They just keep special summoning and special summoning. If you catch them at a bad time, they either have to stop their combo and they end off with a subpar field, or they have to keep going and then give you additional draws, which is going to spell bad news for them, right? Especially because you have the chance of drawing into cards like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit along the way. So yeah, that does it for all of the monsters. Next off, we're going to go into the spell cards. Okay, so for the spell cards, starting off, we are playing 3 copies of Trickstar Light Stage. Now, Trickstar Light Stage is a phenomenal field spell for the Trickstar archetype, and it's searchable by Trickstar Candina, so it's very, very easy to access this card, especially because, terraforming is already a staple way of accessing field spells. Now, Trickstar Light Stage has the effect where when this card is activated, you can add 1 Trickstar monster from your deck to your hand. So we're already off to a very good start. Candina can search this can search Candina, and then, you can search an additional card on top of that with whatever you end up searching. So you can also, once per turn, you can target 1 set card in your opponent's spell and trap zone. While this card is in the field zone, that set card cannot be activated until the end phase, and your opponent must activate it during the end phase, or they have to send it to the graveyard. And each time a Trickstar monster you control inflicts battle or effect damage to your opponent, you can inflict an extra 200 damage to them. So this card is absolutely phenomenal because it just stacks with all of your Trickstar's burn effects. If your opponent activates spell trap cards when you have Candina on the field, every time they draw a card or add a card from their deck to their hand, when Lycoris is on the field, it's just going to double the damage, basically. It takes 400 damage every time. And that damage actually does add up. It's quite scary how much searching goes on in the game, and Lycoris is a very, very big deterrent for that. So Trickstar life stage is fantastic. You can also very easily lock down your opponent's back row. People are playing solemn strikes and things like that. It's just very easy to lock down those things so that you can go for your plays without really having to worry about their back row. And if it's something like a strike, they can't activate it during the end phase. It just gets sent to the graveyard, just a free spot removal. As long as the card's not like MST or anything that they can just chain to this, you're going to be fine. So yeah, 3 copies of Trickstar Light Stage, definitely a staple in any Trickstar deck. And of course, to accompany that, we have to play 3 copies of Terraforming, because Light Stage is not once per turn, so if you have multiple copies, you can just search out multiple Trickstar monsters, which is very nice. Now, we're going to go into some of the fusion targets that our Predator Plant engine can search. So, of course, we're going to start off with the main fusion card that we're searching is going to be Brilliant Fusion. Now, Brilliant Fusion is a phenomenal card, so you can easily summon Gemini Seraphonite from your extra deck by sending your whatever Gemini you're running in your main deck and an additional light monster. So you can send your Trickstars, you can send your Trick Clown, you can even send Arc Lord Christia, and then you can summon her from the graveyard, and I'll show you how in just a little bit. But Brilliant Fusion is a phenomenal way of setting up graveyards and for getting additional normal summons. Okay, and the next card that we play is going to be 2 copies of Instant Fusion. Now, we do play a couple of Instant Fusion targets in the extra deck, and we'll get into that when we get to the extra deck, but they help us for spot removal, and they help us extend our plays by giving us additional ways to go for synchro plays. So that's why I have 2 copies of Instant Fusion here. It's going to be kind of a low priority, like a secondary priority. First, you obviously want to get your Brilliant Fusion out from your deck, but if you do happen to open up with Brilliant Fusion, you can easily go for an Instant Fusion, which allows you to set up for very, very strong fields. Now, speaking of secondary targets that you want to search, if you have a Brilliant Fusion in your hand, you're definitely going to want to search out a copy of D-Fusion. Now, we only play 1 as a tech because it is searchable with our Predator Plants, but D-Fusion is phenomenal in conjunction with Brilliant Fusion, and I have this really... I wouldn't say it's a broken play or anything, but it's just a very fun play that usually catches people off guard. What you do is, with your Brilliant Fusion, you'll send your Gemnite monster to the graveyard, and then you'll send your Arc Lord Christia. Then what you can do is just activate D-Fusion on your Seraphonite after you use the additional normal summon if you need it. And you can summon the Arc Lord Christia straight from your graveyard by just returning the Seraphonite back to your extra deck. And it's just phenomenal how many people just go, wait, what? And so yeah, after you make all your plays, you can just defuse your Seraphonite, and then you have an Arc Lord Christia just protecting you because your opponent cannot special summon anymore, period. And it's just a phenomenal tech card. When it goes off, it's just amazing. I definitely recommend you try it out for yourself. If you don't like it, you can obviously cut this from your deck, but let me tell you, this just wins you so many games. It steals you so many games. I just absolutely love it. Okay, and of course, for the last spell card in this deck, we're going to play 1 copy of Raigeki, just a really easy way for us to clear fields. Trickstar monsters are relatively low in attack points, and I'm not playing Honest and stuff in this deck. It just doesn't really fit, and they're kind of bricks to draw into. So I cut the Honest and stuff, but 1 copy of Raigeki is still really good for the field clears. Swings the game around, clears the field so that your monsters can poke for additional damage. Your light stage can trigger multiple times. You just keep burning your opponent little by little. You kind of chip them away. It's just a really annoying deck for your opponent to play against, right? But it's in a way that it's kind of refreshing. It's not what you typically play against when you're playing against Trickstars. But yeah, that does it for the spell cards, and next off we're going to go into the trap cards. Okay, so for the trap cards, we are actually playing 3 copies of Trickstar Reincarnation. Of course, I don't have my copies of Reincarnation. They're still expensive, right? I don't think it's worth it to get them, at least right now, and there is the probability that they might get hit on the ban list because they did in the OCG, so that's why I'm kind of holding off for now. But 3 copies of Reincarnation is definitely really good. It just banishes your opponent's entire hand, so if they're searching and stuff, once you know that they searched out a very important piece for their combos, banish their entire hand, they draw a new one, that's fine. But it also has the Monster Reborn effect, where you can just banish this card from your graveyard, and then special summon a Trickstar monster from your graveyard back to your side of the field. So you can summon back things like your Link monsters, you can summon back things like Candina, Lilybell, your Lycoris, whatever you really need at the time. It's just really, really nice to put extra damage on board, extra monsters for Link summons, just extra board presence in general. I definitely highly recommend you play 3 copies of this card. But you can get away with, like, 1 or 2 copies if that's all you have. You just have to find some other cards to replace them in the main deck, right? Maybe like a couple of Mystical Space Typhoons or something like that. And the last card that I play is going to be 3 copies of Solemn Strike. It's just a really good negation. I believe it's a pretty strong staple right now, especially if you're going second. This deck is designed to go first or second, so that's why I have these types of negation in here. So, you have a combination of hand traps, you have a combination of traps. It's just the deck that really likes to play both offensively and defensively, and it's kind of weird because you do have that burn element that's built into the archetype, so it puts your opponent on a clock, and Solemn Strike is definitely really great for negating those very key plays that your opponent's trying to make in order to swing the game back in their favor. So, of course, that's why I play 3 copies of those. And yeah, that does it for the main deck. Next off, we're going to go into the side deck. Alright, so for the side deck, starting off, we're going to go into some of the hand traps that we're playing in this deck. We're playing 3 copies of DD Crow. Now, DD Crow is a phenomenal card, especially now that the field spell engine is basically at its prime, with Dragon Ravine, with Destrudo getting released in the most recent set of Circuit Break. It's going to be very common, and being able to snipe that Destrudo, especially after your opponent paid half their life points, is just, it's going to be devastating to your opponent. And Trickstars are a deck that can definitely manage to play a lot of hand traps. They have so much consistency with their own field spells, with their own innate ability to search in their archetype and make their own plays. DD Crow, is just a phenomenal addition to the Ghost Ogre, to the Max C, and you have the potential to draw into this with your Max C if your opponent's still going off on their combos. So this is just a good way to interrupt that. Next off, we were playing 3 copies of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, of course. Trickstars are still pretty decent in the meta. They're showing up here and there. It's not too common, but, if you do go up against a mirror match, you can easily side in the Ghost Reaper and hit a lot of their key link monsters, right, like the Holly Angel and things like that. But it's also really good to just hit generic extra deck cards like the Decode Talkers, Proxy Dragons, and anything that your opponent's trying to use to set up a larger field. And if you interrupt those plays, it halts their progress, and they're going to have a very subpar ending. Usually, because this is a pretty unexpected card for most of the time if you're not playing against Spirals. Against Spirals, this card's amazing. You just hit the double Helix, and it stops a lot of their major plays. But yeah, this card's pretty common to see, but definitely not against more rogue decks, right? But we can hit basically the whole spectrum, which is pretty nice. The next card that we play is 1 copy of Dark Hole. If you're going second, more field wipes is going to be very good, especially because this is a very combo-oriented deck with Predaplants and things like that. You don't want your combos to be disrupted. So if your opponent has really good, strong monsters on the field with built-in negation effects and things like that, you can clear the way pretty easily. With 1 copy of Dark Hole, 1 copy of Raigeki, it just increases the chance of seeing it first turn. Next off, we were playing 2 copies of Shared Ride. I just really like this card right now, especially Spirals. They search a lot. Pendulum Magicians for whoever's still playing that deck right now. Shared Ride is just amazing because every time your opponent adds a card from their deck or their graveyard to their hand, you get to draw a card. So it's basically like a Max C, but for searching, essentially. And coupled with things like Lycoris, it's a huge deterrent. They get burned for 200 to 400, depending if you have Light Stage or not, for each card that they're searching, and Shared Ride allows you to draw an additional card. So your opponent will definitely feel the pressure when they're trying to search and go off on their combos. Next off, we were playing 3 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. Just really good standard spell and trap removal. Again, you can put this into your main deck to replace copies of Reincarnation that you may or may not have. This is just here because I don't have any spell and trap removal in the main deck. So having some side is definitely good, especially because there's some people who are still playing things like Paleozoics and stuff, trying to go for an anti-meta approach. So this is a great way to just counteract that as well. And last but not least, I am also playing 3 copies of Quaking Mirror Force. Our monsters are relatively weak, so Quaking Mirror Force is great for if your opponent establishes a huge field, tries to attack into you. It's also really great because you do have enough back row that you can set so that your opponent's going to more likely than not miss the Quaking Mirror Force if you have it set alongside strikes, reincarnations, things like that. Especially because you're playing reincarnation, your opponent's probably not going to try to snipe that card with an MST or anything like that because it is chainable. So because of that, they're less likely to really expect something like a Quaking Mirror Force. So yeah, that's why I have it here. It's just a pretty nice surprise factor in the deck. Okay, so that does it for the side deck. Next off, we're going to go into the extra deck. Okay, so for the extra deck, starting off, we are playing one copy of Mrs. Radiant. Now, Mrs. Radiant, as I explained earlier, can be summoned pretty easily with MX Saber Invoker and the Thousand Blaze that the Invoker summons from your deck. So you summon the Mrs. Radiant, has bottom left and bottom right arrows, and it's just very strong to open up. It's basically like a gateway to extended extra deck plays. Next off, we were playing one copy of Proxy Dragon. Proxy Dragon is pretty standard. You can make Proxy Dragon with Gofu tokens. So you can make 2 tokens into your Proxy Dragon, then you can Gofu and Proxy into your Decode Talker, or things like that. And Proxy Dragon is just really strong, especially if you have an Arcla Christia on your side of the field, because then it protects your Christia from destruction effects, which is really nice. Another way to protect your Christia is, of course, the Decode Talker that I mentioned earlier. Decode Talker, fairly easy to make. Gofu is a 1-card Decode Talker, and it protects things like your Arcula Christia, your other cards on your side of the field from targeting effects. So, again, if you have back row that's set, Quaking Mirror Forces, Strikes, and your opponent's trying to Twin Twister or Mystical Space Typhoon, anything like that, you can just tribute a monster that this marker points to, and fairly easily just negate that and disrupt their disruption, right? A really key thing to note is that if you do go for the MX Saber Invoker play with your Thousand Blaze, Trick Clown, and things like that, you can easily make a free rank 4. You usually summon the rank 4 in this Decode Talker's marker, so that, you know, if you have a Tornado Dragon or something, you destroy your opponent's field spell, things like that, and then when you go to negate your opponent's targeting effects, you can tribute off, let's say, for example, your Tornado Dragon, you're going to have the Performance Trick Clown as the material. So then when you tribute it off, you can summon your Trick Clown back, probably in this marker, and then summon your Thousand Blades back under this marker. So it boosts your Decode Talker by another 1,000, and again, you still have additional targeting protection. You have 2 additional monsters you can tribute off, and again, if you can't tribute them off, or, you know, your opponent just decides, okay, no more of this, he's just going to negate all of my stuff, what you can do next turn is just overlay them again for another rank 4 and just keep going from there. So very, very good card in the extra deck. Okay, so the next card that I play is going to be 2 copies of Trickstar Holly Angel. Now, Trickstar Holly Angel is a fantastic Link monster. What am I saying? It has a bottom left and bottom right marker, so again, this is a very great way to set up for extended extra deck plays. Now, Holly Angel requires 2 Trickstar monsters, of course, because it's an archetype-specific Link monster, and it says that each time a Trickstar monster is normal or special summoned to a zone that this card points to, inflict 200 damage to your opponent. Trickstar monsters this card points to cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, and if your opponent takes damage by a Trickstar monster's effect, this card's attack gains the amount equal to the damage they took until the end of the turn. So this is really great. Again, if you have Candina, if you have Lycoris on the field, you can just keep boosting the Holly Angel's attack points, which is great because she is 2,000 attack. It's not too high, but it's also not too low. And she can easily inflict nice burn damage to your opponent by when you're summoning your Trickstar monsters back to one of these Link monsters with Link zones with your Reincarnation, or, you know, if you're summoning a Candina to one zone, you add a Lilybell, summon the Lilybell here. If you add Lycoris, you can bounce back the Candina, summon the Lycoris to another zone. You just keep continuously burn your opponent. It's a pretty decent utility card, but I'm running 2 copies. You could run 1. I'm running 2 copies just because the Trickstar plays are pretty consistent. They're recurring, the resources. So unlike the other Link monsters, you can actually make multiple Holly Angels throughout the course of a single duel. So the last Link monster that I play is going to be 1 copy of Trickstar. I believe it's a Catbat or something, Black Catbat. I don't have the copy of it right now, but I'm going to be getting one soon. It has I believe it has a left marker and the down marker or something like that. It's a really it's a left and right marker, yeah. It's a fantastic card because it's a left and right marker. It requires 2 Trickstar monsters just like Holly Angel, but it's really like a Proxy Dragon. It extends your plays. So if you have your Holly Angel here and you can summon your Black Catbat here, you can summon extra deck monsters here and here to left and right of this card. And it's just a great way to extend your plays. It's also pretty good because it has the opposite effect of Holly Angel, where every time, I believe every time a monster in this zone is in its left or right zones are destroyed and sent to the graveyard, your opponent's monsters each lose like 200 attack points. It's not going to be coming up too often, but again, it's just another way for us to access left and right markers, especially because if you have Mrs. Radiant, if you go through your Predaplant combo, you have Mrs. Radiant on the field, you can't summon the Holly Angel to one of these zones because, you know, the Holly Angels are bottom left, bottom right, so you have to have something that's left and right markers. More likely than not, you don't really want to summon your Proxy Dragon in situations where you can't utilize this protection effect, or you don't really have too much extra plays that you can go for. Black Cat Bat is definitely a very strong card in that situation because it has more attack than Proxy Dragon, has 2,000 attack, and it's just fairly easy for us to summon with 2 Trickstar monsters, especially when we want to clear our field for additional monsters to summon. So definitely very good. You only need 1 copy, again, because your reincarnation can just banish itself and bring this back, and because it has left and right markers, it has a lot more utility than Holly Angel when you're bringing it back, because it goes to your main monster zones and not the extra monster zone at the top of the field. Okay, so that does it for all of the Link monsters. Next off, we're going to go into the XYZs. Okay, so starting off the XYZs, we're playing 1 copy of the MX Saber Invoker. Again, you're overlaying into this with your 2 Predaplant monsters, so it's fairly easy to go for this and summon out your Thousand Blades from your deck, go into your Mrs. Radiant, go from there. Next off, we were playing 1 copy of Castel, the Sky Blaster Musketeer. Pretty standard rank 4 monster that we play, and I think it's just self-explanatory at this point, right? The next card that we play is 1 copy of Tornado Dragon. Tornado Dragon's good for spot removal. We don't have any main deck Spawn Trap removal, except for maybe Light Stage, if you can consider it that way. So Tornado Dragon's also a great way to just lock down our opponent's field spells, back row, and things like that, and just deter them from playing their and setting their back row. So that's it for the XYZs. You could play things like Baguska and things like that too. I just, of course, don't have my copy yet, and the extra deck is actually quite tight. If you want a space for Baguska, you could probably just cut out 1 copy of Holly Angel, and you should be fine. But, you know, it's up to you to experiment with that. So next off, we're going into some of these synchro monsters that we play. And like I said, this deck has a lot of utility and a lot of unexpected plays that your opponent just probably won't be prepared for most of the time. So we're also playing 1 copy of Psyframe Lord Omega, of course, because this can recycle your Trickstar reincarnations from the Banished Zone. It's fairly easy to summon as well, because Lycoris is very easily accessible with your Candina, your Light Stage, your Terraforming. All of those cards just lead to a Lycoris. And you have Gofu. Gofu's your level 5 tuner in the deck. At least in the main deck. We'll get into the fusions in just a bit for instant fusion targets. But yeah, Psyframe Lord Omega is just great. Also adds disruption to your opponent's hand, which is nice. Additional disruption to the hand after you reincarnation your opponent. You can just snipe another card that they just drew from their hand. It's just a very effective way to control what they can do. Not as bad as Handlock per se, but still kind of annoying to your opponent, right? This deck is designed to do that. The next card that we play is 1 copy of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. Probably wondering, well, how are you summoning this? The main way we're going to summon Crystal Wing is through Ultimaya Zolkin. Now, Zolkin is fairly easily accessible because we have so many ways to search out a Brilliant Fusion to summon our Seraphonite. Seraphonite's going to be our level 5 monster that we use that's a non-tuner, and of course you have Gofu as your level 5 tuner, or we actually have Sea Monster Theseus as one of the fusions that we play in our extra deck, and that's another way that you can access the Zolkin with Theseus and Seraphonite or Gofu and Seraphonite. You summon your Zolkin, when you set a card to your spell or trap card, basically, your Zolkin can summon a level 8 Dragon Synchro from your extra deck, and you can summon the Crystal Wing straight away. It just adds another layer of negation to your disrupt your opponent and protect your field, essentially. So very, very powerful play. Unfortunately, though, of course, since you're using your Seraphonite as one of the materials, you cannot actually defuse that Seraphonite into your Christia, so it's either Crystal Wing or it's Christia. So we do have a multitude of plays. It's not just, you know, you have to summon Christia or else you lose. You have different ways to go about playing the deck. Okay, so that does it for the synchros. Next off, we're going to go into some of the fusions. So for the fusions, we're starting off with 1 copy of Thousand Eyes Restrict. This is one of our instant fusion targets. This is really great spot removal. If you just summon this card with instant fusion, take one of your opponent's monsters, and equip it to it, then you can use the Thousand Eyes Restrict as a monster for, let's say, a Link summon. So you can get rid of it, and so you still have access to your battle phase and things like that. It just took one of your opponent's monsters down with it. So that's pretty good. And then next off, we are also playing one copy, as I mentioned earlier, of Sea Monster of Theseus. The main reason why this is here, it's a level 5 tuner monster. So if you don't have access to Gofu, you can still go for Omega with Theseus and your Lycoris. If you have that instant fusion in your hand, of course you can still go for the Ultimaya Zulkin to go for your Crystal Wing. It's just a pretty versatile card in this deck. Next off, the last card in the extra deck, we're actually playing one copy of Gemnite Seraphonite. This is going to be our target for Brilliant Fusion, so you can summon it, and then you can get your additional normal summon. So if you go for your Predaplants, you're normal summoning your Orphis Scorpio, going off from there, and then once you get your Seraphonite on the field, you can, if you have Terraforming, Light Stage, or Candina, now you can normal summon your Candina, go for searches, and it's just a very, very consistent combination of cards. And Seraphonite is just so much synergy, so many plays that you do with this deck, with this Seraphonite, and I really do love it. So yeah, that does it for the extra deck, and that does it for the deck profile. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more Trickstar videos, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.